I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker. She's the co-director of CRESST at the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies and a distinguished research professor, Dr. Eva Baker.
Hey, hi. Well, I hate to speak after Anderson students, because they're also expert, both in content and in style. So give me a break. Take a look at my slide. Can you see it? Okay. This is Jacob when he was 14 months old. No moans for grandmothers. Jacob and I were pretty tight at that point. I would go over to his house in the afternoon and play basketball with rolled up socks, 14 months old, and watch Teletubbies with him. How many of you know what Teletubbies are? Some, okay. So one day we were watching the show, and a few minutes into it, Jacob seemed to get agitated, and he used his standard gesture to say he needed something, which was, and so then here's me. Do you want some water? Do you want it louder? Do you want the lights off? Do you want the lights on? Do you want some juice? How about some Apple Jacks? Do you need to go potty? And for each of my options, Jacob shook it off like a baseball pitcher. So he then looks at me, captures my gaze exactly, stood up, walked to the left end of the screen, like this. Eye contact still, right? And the baby walked backwards. So I got it. Jacob wanted me to rewind the DVR. Now, think about how remarkable that thinking is that he had to do. What he had to do is, number one, understand reverse. Number two, recognize there was a mechanism to make that work. Number three, acknowledge that I was just completely witless as far as understanding what he wanted. Four, engage my attention exactly, so I would pay attention to what he was doing. And then five, look at his two-dimensional screen and transform it into physical action in his own little body by walking backwards. Okay, that's really complex thinking, right? So why do I care and sort of regale you with this? The problem is that kind of thinking is not very well, kids are not very well exposed to that in schools, let's say K-12. People spend their time doing other things. And my point is that if we want kids to learn and survive in a very unpredictable future, and that's getting more unpredictable as we talk, then people have to become very adaptive, very sensitive to communications, and have to apply knowledge that they have to whole new situations that they never imagined before. So that's what the pitch is today. That is to think about that kind of education for younger kids. I'm sure it's the case at Anderson that you have those kinds of educational opportunities. But for kids in schools right now, not so much. So in the olden days, teachers were in charge of their own classrooms. They got to decide more or less, given a very general curriculum, what to teach, and they constructed or wrote their own tests and gave them to kids and gave them grades. More recently, what we have had is standardized tests. Many of you were probably exposed to the wonders of that. And those tests are driven by concerns for accountability. Accountability has a huge amount of political support, but it is simply doesn't work. We have not improved our schools. We have not empowered the poorest of our kids. And despite there's a general policy consensus that this is a really good thing to do. So how should we think about this? Is there a way to change it? Take a look at this slide. In any of the international comparisons that we've been doing over the last, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years, there's been a change. The US isn't so much dropping as other countries are rising up and accelerating their growth. They're not only focusing on things like, could people get the same right answer, but they are also now embracing topics like social emotional learning, problem solving, adaptive inferencing, the things that I was talking about. And this is a very dangerous place for us to be if we're in an internationally competitive environment. So here are some notions about what we know is predictable about the future, because it's happening right now and it's changing pretty rapidly. One is that we expect that demography is going to be extraordinarily important, and if you haven't spent time looking at differential birth rates in developed and different kinds of level of development of countries, I suggest you do it. It will change your mind about what to pay attention to. All of this, of course, is overlaid by a very interesting focus on technology and the interaction that technology permits. So if we think this is the future, and there will be increasing competition across a global spectrum, then it's very important for our kids, all kids, to be able to compete. So what could we do about that? The reality is that in our country, educational reform is very hard. It seems not to work. And one of the reasons it's hard is because we tend to focus on issues like governance or political hot points like unions, or I like charter schools, or I hate charter schools, not focusing on what is going on in the child or student's mind. We're not focusing on the kid. So we have an idea that would help us, because I think we have to think different and think big. And so right now, you all know about the Human Genome Project, right? And what does the Human Genome Project start to allow us to do? It allows us to personalize medical treatment, correct? That's where we're going with it. We have a project, an activity. It's a worldwide project, but it's only a project in a pilot sense at UCLA, which we call the Learnome. And the Learnome is about thinking and trying to map, just like the genome mapped, all of the requirements of school learning. So they'll be floating in the cloud like everything else. We've done some of these already. It is something like 10 to the 12th, lots of zeros to figure out how many elements and combinations there might be. And it would allow us to figure out how to become more agile, how to create personalized educational plans for people, and how to finally motivate people who don't seem to be interested in schooling, but if they could choose things that they were focused on, build their own portfolio of expertise. So this is something we're working on, and what has to change, of course, is the way tests happen, because tests can no longer be conforming and comparing people on the same basis. Essentially, what we want to have is valid alternative profiles for folks. So this is a strategy that we're involved in now, and that we are, let me show you one thing. Naturally, you can't read this, but what this shows you, just to give you a sense of the complexity, is from kindergarten through 12th grade, something called the Common Core State Standards. This is mathematics, and this is what the network of connected concepts looks like, and it has many layers underneath it. So we've done this for many topics, many cognitive ideas, and we're able, we think now, because we do a lot of game work at CRESST, the center I work at, is to create these game levels or assessments of open-ended performance on the fly using an appropriate computational model. This is really something highly desirable for everybody. So we can't figure out the Learnome in a minute. It's going to be a multidiscipline, multi-billion-dollar activity. This doesn't seem like exactly the right financial atmosphere in which to try it out. But what could we do right now? And I think what we could do is to demand that every test that anybody takes in school requires students to do something that they have not been directly taught. It requires that they transfer and that they are able to go demonstrate, just like little baby Jacob, their sense of adaptability, their sense of problem solving, and their creativity. So if we do that, maybe we'll have a happier, more balanced life. And by the way, Jacob is now interested in Dodger's strategy. Thanks.
Dr. Baker, thank you so much.